Some people in this world are on the front lines of the struggle between good and evil, and some, like us, bear witness. I'm Therese Apel.
And I'm Nicole Kral. You may have heard us as we worked on stories and series about law enforcement and crime. And it's safe to say we've seen some of the best and worst of human nature.
We decided there's no greater honor than bringing you the stories of the men and women who seek out the monsters, who speak for the victims, and who put the pieces together on some of the biggest Mississippi crime stories of our time. Welcome to Investigation Homicide. Hey everybody, welcome to Investigation Homicide. I'm Therese Apel, and today is a special day for us, not only because it is Peace Officers Memorial Day, but also 4 years ago today we started Dark Horse Press, which I don't know if Nicole remembered, but I have, of course, my partner in crime, Nicole Kral.
I was going to bring it up if you weren't.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's our anniversary, sort of.
We have to.
Yeah.
It made me, because I didn't realize it until I was almost about to leave for here, and I saw it pop up on my Facebook, and I was like, oh,
yeah,
I can't believe it's been 4 years. I always tell people, I'm like, I don't know, it was like, it's been like 8 years.
Yeah.
It feels like it's been forever.
It feels like it took forever, but it also feels like it was just yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. So. Well, I mean, that was kind of the pinnacle. That was the turning point of
a lot of things.
A lot of things for us.
Yeah. For both of us, personally and professionally.
Exactly.
So happy anniversary, Nicole.
Happy anniversary, Therese.
We also, in the studio, although she's not like in a chair, we have our third wheel in a good way,
Ooh.
Amanda Johansson.
Yeah.
She is sitting over there behind Daniel, and there's Daniel. There's Nicole, and there's Amanda. So she's here just to kind of cheer us on and add to the conversation. If you think of something, just yell it to us.
She can always pop in next to me if she needs to.
And then our guest today is everybody's favorite. We love Charlie Smith, the former Jackson Police Department detective, retired, and he's always got stories to tell. Charlie, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So today we were going to talk about just, today being Peace Officers Memorial Day. One thing that's in the forefront of a lot of conversations today is the fact that the world has kind of turned against police officers. And it's not like police officers just think this is going to be a lot of rainbows and puppies, but there is a cost to protecting and serving. And I knew that Charlie in his career, he's seen pretty much everything, and you'd be a good person to talk to about this, Charlie.
Well, there were days when I thought I saw everything, and then I'm going, nah, not really, because I drive up something even worse.
Right.
But it'll take a toll on you. And,
now, for the people that maybe don't remember you, or maybe this is the first time they've listened, give us a quick background on you.
I should have this written down.
Yeah, at this point, there should be a script.
I was a 30-year veteran of JPD. I joined Jackson Police Department in 1975. And spent 30 years there. Out of that 30 years, I spent 13 years as a crime scene investigator, and then I was promoted to sergeant, and I retired as shift sergeant. I was working precinct 2 when I retired. I also served, I think, 12 years on the SWAT team, and the main reason I went into the mobile crime lab unit is I was an action adrenaline / junkie, and that enabled me to be a part of every major crime in Jackson during that period of time. Where versus working homicide, you work just strictly homicide. You know, auto theft, you're circled just with auto theft. I got to work it all, and that's what I liked about it. Plus, it was still in uniform. I was still on the street. I never left the streets. I never did. I had a couple of requests for me to come up to division headquarters, but I wouldn't do it. I'm a street junkie. And
now, think back to when you made the decision that you wanted to go into law enforcement. Do you remember who you were back then?
I was a 9-year-old.
Oh.
My mother says I had wanted to be one since she could remember. I don't know what it was. I think I said this. I actually believe I was born to do it. But one of my big influences when I was a kid, probably 12, 13 years old, there's a detective lived across the street from me, and he's kind of my role model, my hero, Captain Bill Watson. He was the captain of detectives of JPD back in the day. This was the early 70s. late 60s. And when he would come home for lunch, I mean, he was in his city issue vehicle, and he would let me sit in his car and listen to the radio as long as I didn't touch anything. And I listened to that radio and I said, man, I want to do that. That's it. And of course, that's the time when Adam 12 came on TV, and I'd watch that tirelessly. I still watch Adam 12. And I was hooked. That was just what I wanted to do.
When I think of a detective from back then, I have like
Oh,
that
yeah.
they would have like pinstripe suits on and
They were still,
with their notepads
exactly,
and
they were
a
still wearing their
cigar.
trench coats and fedoras.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
the Sam
So
Spade look.
so
I wish
cool.
I'd come back.
Yeah.
We
I
can
really
make that
do.
work.
If-
We can do it.
Let's try it. Let's see if we can't influence these
Emotion.
guys out here.
Like,
and through Captain Watson, I got to meet other police officers and all that. And I kind of, as the years went by, I made more acquaintances. And I was a cop junkie. I talked to them. I wasn't scared of them. I'd go and talk to them. And as I was getting ready for the academy in 1970, I was actually getting ready in 1974. You know, they always told me, says, if you can run 2 miles, if you do 25 push-ups, and don't let them intimidate you, you'll make it through the academy no problem. And which is exactly, I took that serious. And but I was well briefed by other officers what to expect. And, you know, everybody, and this is kind of funny. When I went for my oral interview board in the 70s, you go before this interview board and you go before like 2 or 3 deputy chiefs, I think a city attorney, the chairman of the Civil Service Commission, and maybe somebody else was there. And they ask you all kinds of questions, naturally, trying to fill you out. And I never forget, one of them asked me, he said, well, Mr. Smith, why do you want to be a police officer? And I told him the truth. I said, I want to chase bad guys and put them in jail. And I never forget, then he was inspector then, Jim Black. He stood up and said, Mr. Smith, I want to shake your hand. I thought I'd done something wrong. I thought they were going to kick me out the door at that moment. And I said, what did I do? He said, well, you're the only person that's actually told the truth. Everybody gets in here and says that they want to help the community and they want to do this and they want to do that. And we all know all you guys want to do is run up and down the road with these blue lights on, chasing people and putting people in jail. I said, but that's what I want to do.
It's so funny that you said that because Amanda and I just had the same conversation the other day because we were talking about different things. And she said, I don't know anybody that actually got into this to help people. And I was like, I do. I know some like that. And she's like, no, you don't. I was like, no, I really do. And then, you know, of course, I'm a journalist. So I was like,
Yeah.
I did. And I can name people that I've helped. And she's like, yeah, most of us got into it because it was cool. And she admits like she just wanted to solve puzzles.
Yeah.
And then the rest of
Yeah.
it grows. So when you say that, like, that's why
Yeah.
she and I are looking at each other
Well-
laughing.
The reality is, you're not going to help anybody. Every now and then, you may get a chance to help somebody with a broke down car, but and Amanda knows, you know, we're not seeing people on their best days.
Yeah.
They're not calling us because, you know, they want us to join their kid's birthday party. And a fireman can kick your door in, hose your house down, ruin your furniture, tear up everything in your kitchen, and you're gonna pat him on the back when he leaves. We kick a door in to arrest a serial killer, and we're getting sued.
Right.
And it's few and far between actually helping somebody. And sadly, on several occasions when I've actually gone on my way to help somebody, it's turned around and bit me on the butt.
Yeah.
And a good instance, I ran the security at the Iron Horse Grill for years on Friday and Saturday nights. Had a guy come up there. It was a transient. And my job was to keep them off the lot. And he came up to me. He was real nice. And he said, sir, I know why you're here. He said, I just got into town. All I want is a meal, and I'm just hungry. So I went to the kitchen and asked them. I said, can y'all just fix a plate? You know, and I gave it to him. It's styrofoam, obviously. I said, now go around the back. I said, I don't want to see you up here again. And I said, if I catch you bumming anybody up here, I said, that's going to be your worst day. He said, yes, sir, I understand. You won't see me again. 2 nights later, I get a call at the Mayflower restaurant just down the block that there was a man beating at the kitchen door begging for food. And I go up there, and it's him. Before I know it, I am literally in a fight for my life.
Oh, wow.
I'm on the ground. He has bested me. I'll freely admit it.
Mm-hmm.
And he has his hand on my gun.
Oh, geez.
And he's trying to drag my pistol out of my holster. He had it. He had me. And the only thing that saved me is I was able to let go for a split second because I saw a chunk of concrete broken on the curb. And I hit him in the head with it just as hard as I could. Well, the guys in the kitchen saw the fight. And they had called the police. They called the PD. I remember I went up there and listened to the tape. They said, "You better get up here because your policeman's supposed to get killed." And I could hear the units coming. And I said, if I can just hold on until they get here and get this guy off of me. But I'm not fighting for me. I'm fighting for my gun because he had it. And trying to keep your gun in your holster, you're fighting with no hands. And he already had me on my back. And I nailed him with that piece of concrete. And, of course, I caught him out in the jaw and blood went everywhere. And units got there. They thought I'd already been shot when I got there. And when they pulled him off, my gun came out in his hands. And they just about shot him there. But look, they were from me to you. And they managed to get my gun under control. And after that point, I pretty much said, well, I don't think I'm going to be helping anybody anytime soon.
Sure.
Of course, my partner and I, we were on patrol one morning about 2 o'clock, and we noticed a house was on fire. It had just started. We could see the glow from the kitchen, from the living room. And we kind of knew the old man that lived in the house from seeing him because it was our beat, and we worked in that beat. And what it was is he had a lamp that had fallen on a couch. He had a cat, and I think the cat knocked the lamp over, and the bulb was on the couch and started the couch on fire. We called the fire department. And it's amazing how fast a house fire can get going. So we went around the back, kicked the back door in, and got the old man out of the house. By the time FD shows up, and by the time they got there, the whole front of the house was involved.
Sure.
He was so grateful. He wrote a letter to the fire department thanking them for saving his life. And the guys at Station 2 never let us live with that day.
Oh, sure.
I mean, they just every time I'd walk into Station 2, hey, Charlie, you want to read this letter?
Yeah.
Oh.
And
well, then you'll be proud to know that the other day we had a story where Pearl police pulled somebody out of a fire before, or one person out of a fire before it was a fatal fire, unfortunately, before fire department got there. Nothing on the fire department. The police happened to be closer, got this guy out, and I made sure and said that because I've heard of those kind of stories before.
Yeah.
While we're here, let me also point out, if you guys are listening or if you're watching on Facebook, you can make a comment. Just comment on the, on wherever you're watching on Facebook, and we'll see it in most cases. We've got two of probably your former proteges, Mike Ivy and Juan Cloy, have both commented. Juan said Charlie Smith has risen, and Mike Ivy says great CSI. Both of them old JPD guys and now moved on to be chiefs in other places.
Yes. I'm proud of that. I have, I think, 5 of my former officers have become chiefs. One of them is a sheriff. Juan Cloy worked for me in Precinct 3. Great guy. I was so proud. I need to get down to Macomb and let him buy my lunch one day.
Yeah, he's the Macomb
Since
police
he's making
chief
the big
now.
bucks now.
Mike Ivy is over in Oklahoma now after being in Terry.
I see his wife every now and then. She works at my eye doctor's office, so I keep in touch with Mike through her.
Yeah, good.
But Juan, that is one of the coolest guys you ever worked.
He is.
Around. He's a great
gang investigator too.
He's just a great cop. He was another one that was meant to be where he's at.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know somebody's going to be a good cop?
Yeah, internal instinct. It's just like Tyree. I won't tell you what happened to Tyree, but he had a little faux pas when he was on his FTO program. I'll let him tell you what happened. And it could have got him fired, but the way I wrote it up and all that, and, I pretty much smoothed it over for him. Even the commander called me in the office. Says, Charlie, you want to stick with this story? I said, look, Tyree is a green rookie. I said, but that guy's going to be a good cop. He's got the makings of a good cop. I said, and all rookies are the same way. You just got to settle them down.
Yeah.
And
I always say that's why the Bible says, "Remember not the sins of my youth,"
That's
because
right.
we're all idiots when we're kids.
Yeah.
You know.
And I just saw great potential in Tyree. I've been so proud of him being sheriff and the job that he's done as a deputy and a police officer. I could just recognize like uh, Amanda's chief,
Hmm.
Ford Heyman came to me as a rookie, as a right out of the academy, and I saw the potential in him. I
Hmm.
knew he'd be a good police officer.
We've got Keith Freeman on here now too,
Yeah.
talking about you. Great officer, great leader, great mentor.
Well, I thank you, Keith. I hadn't seen Keith in a while. When you get retired, you kind of lose contact with a lot of them. We have a little, I call it the old, it was better when we were there, get together at Barry's Seafood every so often. See some of the old guys. I still actually eat lunch and breakfast with a couple of officers that I came on with 30 years ago, at least twice a week. And it's a bond. I'll say that. And I go back to my cousin / younger brother who just retired from Delta Airlines, but prior to that he was a Marine Corps fighter pilot, flew F-18s for the Marine Corps, and most of the people that were at the retirement party were family and his old squadron from the Marine Corps. And they got the same bond, same call. I mean, Matt has been flying planes since he was like 6, I think.
Yeah.
And he got his pilot's license, I think, when he was 16.
Wow.
And he is the real Top Gun.
That's cool.
And but it was what he was meant to do. And of course, my daughter, she's a counselor.
Oh boy.
And she looked over at me one day a few weeks ago. She said, "Dad, you do know that you're suffering from PTSD, don't you?" I said, well,
Who's
"And
not? Who's not?
who's not?" I mean, when you see the violence, and I was watching Joe Rogan a few weeks ago. I'm not much into watching these guys, but he was talking about police, and he was interviewing a special forces operator that had left the military and had joined a police department. I don't know where, but he was talking to Joe about the trauma that he saw in the service. He said, but I think he'd been a police officer then about 20 years. He said, but that doesn't compare to what I saw in the police department. He said, ours is sporadic. It's intense. It's sporadic. He said, but police officers, this is day in and day out. And for 30 years. Some guys just can't deal with it. Some can't. I think what helped me going, and I lost a lot of good friends. And I try to look at things I don't know, kind of funny. I took the job serious, but I never really took myself serious.
Yeah.
And but and I freely admit the memorial plaque that we've got at JPD headquarters, the union that I was on the executive board of, we paid for that. To this day, I have never been able to go look at it.
Wow.
I have not seen it.
Yeah.
I cannot bring myself to look at it.
That's understandable. It's interesting that you bring that up because I've actually had the conversation twice recently, once on another podcast, about how in 2001 or 2000, just before 2001, I don't remember, there was a reality show called Combat Missions.
Yeah.
So they had like Marine Force Recon, the Green Berets, they had the elite of every
Yeah.
military service. And then they had LA SWAT and New York SWAT. And these guys competed in these various, combat missions.
Yeah.
And so they, as they failed or whatever, they were weeded out. And so your top 3 surprised everyone because it was Marine Force Recon, not
Yeah.
a surprise,
Yeah.
LA SWAT, and New York SWAT.
Hmm.
And I believe it was New York SWAT that won. And I just remember it was a guy named Dexter. And the point was made that, like, yeah, you guys are badass. Y'all are out there doing the thing and everybody knows that you're awesome. But we are in urban warfare almost
Exactly.
daily.
Yeah.
And so that's something that another conversation that I've had with a friend of mine who's a Green Beret is that, you go overseas and you go to war there, and then you come home and you're safe and you're not at war
Right.
anymore. But you guys, and I think you and I have even talked about, you're driving down whatever street in Jackson, and you're like, homicide, homicide,
Exactly.
homicide, shootout, homicide. And you have now a bank of 30 years of memories right here in Jackson, right here where you go to the grocery store, all that kind of stuff. Can you talk about what that's like? You started all those years ago. How has policing changed and how have those things stuck with you?
Well, one, for the exception of maybe you guys, I have maybe 4 civilian friends in my world. Everybody
Wow.
else are cops.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be around civilians. Uh, you know, my little part-time job where I work, I wouldn't say work. I show up. They stress out at everything, and I go, "You guys don't know stress. You have no idea." I said, "This is not stress." And it's just like I referred to the night my partner and I rode on a call. I think it was Cox Street down there behind Jackson State, and we had 2 people already been shot. They were dead, and they were on the front porch. And we heard a woman screaming in the house, and we knew the guy. We could see him. We knew he had a gun. And I never forget. I looked at my partner, and we both told each other, "Bye. See you on the other side,"
Mm-hmm.
because we really didn't think we would make it, or one of us wouldn't make it. And we knew we had backup coming, but it's one of these situations where you got to go. Can't wait. Can't wait for backup. Can't wait for SWAT. You got to go. And we went on in and got the guy, and it's probably a good thing we didn't kill him because the 2 guys on the front porch had gotten in an argument. One of them shot the other one, and the crazy guy inside the house had shot one of the other people.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of a triple play.
That's the kind of thing that most people, I'd say 98% of people don't understand that feeling of like, I'm about to go to my death.
Yeah.
Because it's my job.
That's it.
Because
That's
today's
it.
people would probably say, you can quit a job,
Yeah, but policing and firemen, if you really know what's going on in the real world, obviously be a reporter
Mhm.
or be a beat reporter like
Yeah.
you do. Oh, excuse me. Or talk to an ER nurse at the UMC,
Mhm.
firefighter, or police officer.
Right.
They tell you what's going on in the real world, and civilians have no idea. They have no idea. They're just like in their fantasy world, I'll call it.
That's me.
I was going to say, Nicole, you
Yeah.
just went through this.
No, I go through this all the time because I was one of those people at some point where I was just like, I don't know anything about this world, right? I didn't grow up. My family was not military. We didn't know many cops. We just kind of stuck to ourselves. And then Therese was like, well, I'm going to do this crazy thing. And it was, it became this, I got to meet so many law enforcement people and go to conferences and go meet them one-on-one, even at parties and gatherings and stuff. And I was like, well, it's just interesting to me to hear, because I hear both sides of it, right? Because I'm over here, but I'm also kind of over here. And it's just really interesting that you can say all this, but there's still such a disparity between what it feels like the general public has this distrust of police officers that they don't have for firefighters, that they don't have for whoever else comes. Why do you think that is? Where is that coming from?
I don't know. I think a lot of it is people don't want to know.
Mm-hmm.
They said, they look at us
easier.
as garbage collectors. We'll clean up the garbage. And people want to think that they're safe. I mean, look, when I drove back and forth to Seattle, and I had 3 pistols and 1 shotgun in my car. I mean, because I know what can happen.
Yeah.
And but 90% of what happens never makes it to the media.
Yeah.
It's never a headline unless it's some catastrophic deal. It's not going to get in the media. And of course, being a police officer is no more dangerous than being a lineman for Entergy. It's just the way police officers die is the key. we're murdered. It's going
Mhm.
to be a murder
Right.
unless it's a traffic accident.
Yeah. And generally, when it's a traffic accident, it's because you are en route to go help
Yeah,
somebody,
yeah. A
to
lot
go
of
to a
times it
scene.
is. A lot of times it is.
Mhm.
You know, and it's just. But that's what I tell everybody. I said we just get murdered more. Now, ironically, the Jackson Fire Department is unusual in that, right? They've had more firefighters murdered
Yeah.
than have died fighting fires, and that was
Hmm.
the 4 that were murdered at the Central Fire Station.
We just recently passed that anniversary, didn't we?
Yes,
And did you work that
yes,
scene?
I did. I was first officer on scene there,
Yeah.
and I had gotten the. I was in my office at police headquarters, and of course I was on the SWAT team, so I had a radio that could scan all channels, and they put it out on the intercom at the police department that there was an active shooter at Central Fire Station.
Now, was the word active shooter the term they used at that time?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And so my patrol car was blocked in the basement headquarters. I got out and because you know where police headquarters
Yeah.
is versus Central Station, and I ran out of the bay, but I heard the shots, and but they were sounded like they were coming from the courthouse. And what people don't realize when you hear gunfire, especially in an urban area like downtown,
Mhm.
you can't tell where the shots come because they're bouncing all over the building.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The sound is. And I even got dispatched. I said, headquarters, can you confirm, is this Central Station or the courthouse?
Mhm.
And she came back. She said, this is confirmed. This is at the firehouse, Central Station. So I ran back down to the basement. And what I was hearing was an arson investigator named Dave Berry had encountered Kenny Torrance after the massacre. And Dave Berry and Torrance were shooting it out in the basement of the fire station. And I got in my car by the time, and I got on scene at the fire station. And Dave and I made an entry.
Mhm.
Dave thought there was another shooter too, and but there wasn't. It was just Kenny Torrance and a couple of detectives, Brent Winstead and Chuck Lee, pulled in right behind Torrance, and the chase was on.
Mhm.
They chased him all the way up to North Park, and it was a Ridgeland police officer, motorcycle officer, that shot him, and he was going up there to kill his girlfriend at North Park Mall,
Yeah.
and he'd already murdered his wife in South Jackson.
He
So
was just going to take out everybody on his
he's
way
going to take
out.
out everybody. And while I was listening to the radio, is I won't mention what firefighter it was, but somehow his mic keyed up, and I heard him begging for his life.
Oh God.
And then I heard the shots, and he was telling Torrance, "You don't want to do this. You don't want to do this. This is not necessary." And I don't know how his mic. He may have keyed it up himself. We don't know.
Yeah. So I know that one of the things that I have loved about the first responder community is that even though we give each other hell, I'm a
Oh
volunteer
yeah,
firefighter.
yeah,
It's like stepbrother and sister almost.
yeah,
We can decide who's the sister later, whether it's fire or police. Um, but still, that's family.
yeah. Oh yeah.
What was that like? I mean, and I guess it's another chapter in your
It
book of things that were too
it
close to
was
home.
rough because 2 of the firefighters that were killed were good friends of mine,
Yeah.
and I'm stepping over them to clear the building, and then then I had to work the crime scene,
Mhm.
and I never forget. I was teaching a guy one time, training a new crime scene investigator, and he said, "Charlie, how do you turn off the emotion?" I said, "You just have to, because you got to do the best job you can. You can't do nothing for these people except do your job."
Yeah.
Now, uh, I've been on calls before. When I got through working them, my hand would be shaking so bad I couldn't write.
Mhm.
I'd have to ride around and calm down. And it's probably a good thing I never drank because I would be an alcoholic. Probably be dead by now.
Yeah.
And but you just have to focus and do the best you can. Like with Bobby Biggert, I worked his case. Ricky Joe Simmons, I worked his case. Several other officers, and you just have to put your emotions aside. You have to shut them off. You really do.
Mhm. Now,
It'll,
talk about just kind of as, I mean, because you came in on our podcast and you talked about Bobby Joe Biggert.
yeah,
And you mentioned at that time that there had been several others, Ricky Joe Simmons
yeah,
being one, that you had worked these cases, that
yep,
you had to work the, and
yeah,
in some cases they told you you got to back off, man. We can't have you there
Right.
because it was such a good friend of yours.
Yep.
What, how have you, I mean, I guess maybe you've told us that you can't, that you don't want to hang out with people that aren't cops, that don't get it.
I
But
don't.
how do you assimilate after you've had that kind of career?
I don't think I do. I don't think I really do. I don't talk. I don't. I just don't. Just trying to think. I'm trying to think of the friends that I have that weren't on the job, and I just don't have any.
Yeah.
They don't understand.
Does the general public ever annoy you?
Say again.
Do they ever annoy you?
Who?
The general public.
Every day. I walk out the door
You
and I go,
feel
"You
like-
stupid bitch!" Yeah.
You feel like they don't
yeah. They don't understand. And my family's great. You know, my kids. And, my oldest daughter broke my heart a couple years ago. She said, "Daddy, I never told you." She said, "Because see, I work. I mean, for about 20 years, I was on call 24/7, and she would hear me leave." And she told me, she said, "I'd hear you leave." And she said, "I would cry and cry and cry until I went to sleep." She said, "I was so scared." She never told me that.
That's why she's a counselor now.
Probably so. Well, and so I mean, I know that part of your story is the sadness, but through the years, there have to have been a bunch of victories too.
There were, there was some victories. I mean, obviously catching the guy that killed B.J. Biggert is probably my crowning jewel, I guess you could say. Of course, the shootout at Po Folks Restaurant,
Yeah.
where Juan Cloy was right in the middle of,
Mm-hmm.
and he was pinned down telling everybody, "Get under your car, and we're outgunned." There are some victories, but not many.
Mm-hmm.
Not many. I'm just trying to think. I've arrested a lot of bad guys. And been part of some really traumatic experiences on the police department. Of course, and it's a cliche, but the children do get to you. There's one
Sure.
that still gets to me, and I actually have an evidence tag I had put on her toe.
Yeah.
I've got
and-
it in my closet today, and I sat with her after she had been beaten to death by her mother's boyfriend, and I had gone up there to get some pictures, and I had to take some hair samples from her to match up with the hair samples that were in his boot, and I just sat there with her on Sunday morning for about 2 or 3 hours, just sitting in the exam room, just sitting. She was such a pretty little girl.
Well, and I apologize for trying to jump in on that. I've interviewed cops on camera for so long that I recognize when emotion's coming up, and I always try and jump in to save you from having that happen
Thank
on
you.
camera. So I apologize for that, but thank you for being brave enough to talk through that. Because obviously that's something that these are the stories that you guys don't see in real life. These are the stories that if you are someone who watches true crime or you're addicted to the ID channel or whatever like that, you may know a little bit about a story like that. But I think someone like Charlie, someone like Amanda, Nicole and I, to some extent, being,
Mommy.
on the periphery of that, to know those things, it changes who you are. And yeah, I'm not going to lie. When you ask that about the general public being annoying, you know me. There are times that I'll watch somebody having a come apart about something like that. I used to always use the joke about IKEA drapes, and then we bought drapes at IKEA the other day when we were with Amanda, so I can't make that joke anymore. But, people
It's a
coming
whole
apart about
thing.
everyday things
Yeah.
that are very important to them, and understandably, because they still live in a world that in their mind is safe.
Yeah.
But we're sitting here talking about this little girl that Charlie will remember forever, and now that he's told us the story, we'll remember forever, too. So
Well, it's interesting that we live in such different worlds, even though we're just both here. Because to you, the world is wholly unsafe, and to me,
Yeah.
the world is
World ain't
fine.
safe.
Like, I can go wherever I want,
I
and I'm
see all
gonna
these
be
people
okay.
live in these gated communities. I go, are you kidding me? You're not safe.
right.
And I hear stuff all the time. We want to make the community feel safe. I want to hear a chief say, we want to make the community be safe. The hell with feeling safe.
Mm-hmm.
And but literally, like I said, I had an uncle who lived in Taos, New Mexico, who had died, and went there to his funeral. And again, I was packing at least three pistols, one on me, one with me, and one in the back of the SUV. And one of my cousins asked me, he said, "What are you scared of?" I said, "Not one damn thing."
Nuh-uh. Nope.
But I know what can happen, and it's going to happen probably in a span of about 3 seconds.
Right.
So you've got to be. My family will tell you, we can't go out and eat with Dad because Dad's always got to have his back to the wall. He's always got to be watching. But that's the living. I'll go nuts if I'm
Yeah.
sitting at the door and I see some police officers even today sitting at a restaurant, and none of them have got their radar up. And to give you a good example of, I want to say Bellingham, Washington. You have to look it up. I can't remember the name of the town. 4 police officers. They go in there, and it's that area is a feel safe area, and they go in the morning. I think it was a Sunday morning. The first thing they do is they bury their heads in their stupid laptops. Well, there's a crazy guy running around, and guess what he does? He walks in the coffee shop and killed all 4 of them
Yeah, I remember this.
because none of them had the guard up.
Yeah.
And I see officers do that. Now, when as a police officer, when I would go in uniform, there were very few restaurants I would even go into. But when I'd go in uniform, I was always in a position where I was watching. And I was waiting for basically for somebody to come ambush me.
Yeah.
And
It's funny. I've got a story that you'll understand why all my cop friends. When I got back, I went to Nashville recently to go to the Pearl Jam concert, and I had a friend that was going to go with me that canceled the last minute, and I said, that's fine. I'll just have an empty seat sitting next to me, and it's going to be great. And so when I left, my car was parked 0.4 of a mile away, but I was using my GPS on my
Yeah.
phone, right? And so it routes me this way, and I'm walking this way, and then I look down again, and all of a sudden it's got me pointed the other way. And so anyway, I navigated for probably 30 minutes. I ended up walking a full 5 miles. I passed the bus stop. I passed a homeless shelter. I passed another homeless shelter. I passed, the rescue mission, whatever all. And it's dark. And there are a couple times that I'm the only person on foot in this dark area of town with the homeless people sleeping on the side of the road. And because I had gone to a concert, I couldn't carry my gun. And I'm walking. It's the first time in I can't remember how long that I have actually felt terror. And I'm just walking along because I'm like, I am fully exposed right now. I don't have any protection. Yes, I do some martial arts. I've done them for years, but I'm not safe. And it was the first time in so long that I've had that feeling, not that I feel just safe. I mean, I'm like you. It's like I got my gun. I'm fine. And in that case, I wasn't. And I think that is where, maybe other people would be afraid. But I had this full knowledge of like, I've written this story before,
Yep.
Mm.
I would say probably, I'd say 80 to 90% of the murders that I worked, if the victims had been armed, they would have saved themselves, or could have, if
Yeah.
they'd been prepared. Now, that being said, where I worked, 90% of the murders that I worked, in an offhand way, that people that got killed probably needed killing to start with, because most of them were dopers and everything like that. And it's just a young officer that was working with me one time. We were at the UMC and we were doing a follow up on what was going to be a murder. The UMC, they're going to work on you. They're going to work on you.
Yeah.
And the young officer looked at one of the doctors and said, "Why you work so hard on this damn dope dealer thug, that's going to die anyhow?" And the doctor looked at him real stern. He said, "Because when you come in here all shot to hell, we'll know what we're doing."
Yes.
And that young officer learned a good lesson that night.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, they're practicing.
And it's not just that. You never know who's going to turn around and be a preacher.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, they might see Jesus in that moment.
That's right. You never know.
So,
and yes, and this is a funny story because I got tons of funny stories. But myself and a fellow sergeant, it was a New Year's Eve. We called each other. He was working another precinct. We were going to eat at Sonny's Barbecue on Highway 80. real quick before the stuff really hit the fan. Dispatch puts out a call that Hines SO, Clinton PD, were in pursuit. And she asked me, she said that units are coming through Jackson. She said, Sarge, do you want any precinct 2? I said, negative. I said, if the sheriff's department's involved in it, we'll let them slide. And I told my units, I said, just watch it, monitor it, and see what happens. Well, I'm sitting at Lynch and 80, and I watch them go by. And there's like 12 cars going. I said, good Lord, you know. And I'll never forget, after they went by, I went through the intersection, and I met my sergeant buddy at Sonny's. And he said, what are they doing? I said, I don't know. We looked down, and they're going down Highway 80, and then they come back. And at the old Holiday Inn on Highway 80, which was a horseshoe driveway, the car goes up into the hotel. And every one of those morons chases her through the parking lot. Not one of them had the good sense to cut the...
To block it.
To block it. And I'm going there, what the hell's going on? And so he and I are standing there watching the cluster, or what we call a Charlie Foxtrot. And you know what that means, that stands for. And these civilians walk up to us, and they ask us, officers, what's going on? And I said, oh, they're practicing. She said, really? I said, yes, New Year's Eve, going to be a big night. They're practicing. And the dingbat said, well, that's a good idea. And I went, how stupid can you be? And so we watched them go out the parking lot of the Holiday Inn, and naturally they crash at Highway 80 and Ellis Avenue.
Yeah.
So they start calling for JPD to come work the wreck. And I told my dispatch, I said, negative, headquarters. I said, they started this mess. I said, we are not cleaning it up. You know, I said, the sheriff's department, they're big boys. They can work a wreck. They can write one up. I said, we can send a unit down there to block the intersection, but we are not working there. We're not cleaning up their mess.
Right.
So, but I still can't remember. I can't believe that woman actually said, oh, really? That's
she
a
thought
good
you
idea.
Were serious. Yeah. Well, and so when you think about just the time served, what would you say is the biggest thing that's changed in policing since you got started?
Well, the false narrative of the media nowadays that cops are out here slaughtering people. Now, of course, in the 70s, you know, we were dealing with the radical. We were dealing with the Symbionese Liberation Army, the Republican New Africa, the Black Panthers, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the Republican New Africa had just killed Lieutenant Skinner in 71.
Yeah.
And there were still remnants of that going on. And we were losing more officers per year back in those days, and than actually being killed today.
Yeah.
But do you know why?
Was it bulletproof vest?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
By looking, I think 1972 or 4 is the single deadliest year of police officers in the United States. And body armor is as a matter of fact, I was one of the first officers on JPD to wear body armor.
Wow.
And I hated it. I hated that
sure.
thing. And as the years went by, and especially after Billy Hickman got killed, another good friend of mine, more officers started wearing body armor. Because when Billy got killed, if he'd been wearing the cheapest body armor made, it would have saved his life.
Yeah.
Even the leather gun belt that he was wearing stopped the shot. It was just birdshot. But at the time, JPD wasn't issuing body armor. But after that, they woke up. But there were times it would be so god awful hot that me and my partner, we'd set them on their seat. It was a stupid move on our part, but we just decided, you know, okay, look, what we're going to do, we're going to boil to death or be shot to death. I'll take getting shot. And when the sun went down, we'd vest up.
Come back to your senses.
Right.
Heat will do it to you.
Yeah. Exactly.
I actually had a friend that figured out how to hook up he got like just some kind of dryer pipe, you know, that slinky dryer pipe that comes out of the dryer, and he got it to where he could tape it over his air conditioner and then run it up his sleeve into his vest. Yeah, but it was because of that same thing.
We used to go to the hospitals and get respirator hoses.
Yeah.
that they had. They would let us have. We'd knock out the air conditioner vents of our patrol car and stick them down in our
Mhm.
vest,
Yeah.
and to just try to keep a little cool because it's just miserable down here wearing that thing.
Yeah.
That's bad.
And of course, ours are under the vest. You know, most I see a lot of guys wearing the over the shirt armor.
Yeah.
At least you can unzip it and get a little air.
Right.
But you know, my wife used to say that was her favorite sound when I came home at night, is hearing that Velcro peel off.
Mm.
Sure.
And so, but yeah, it's there is a false narrative going on, and I think a lot of police officers today. I grew up. I guess you could say I grew up hard.
Mhm.
You know, not that I was a gang banger or anything like
Yeah.
that. It's just just had it harder,
Yeah.
and we did stupid things. You know, and we were rougher back in my childhood, and a lot of officers nowadays have had a pretty cushy life and have gotten into law enforcement, and they got this shit moment. You know,
Yeah.
they're not prepared for the trauma and the what they're going to see out here, and a lot of these younger officers that are in these little towns are, I kind of worry about them, and because they don't get the experience that we had in Jackson. I mean, you'll get you know, a year's worth of experience in a month in Jackson versus some of these smaller cities.
Yeah.
And a good example of that is I go back to the Columbine shooting,
Mhm.
and my cousin and her husband lived in Littleton, Colorado. Her husband was the fire chief of Littleton,
Oh
Colorado.
wow.
And I was getting ready to go to work, and it flashed on the news about that. And I said, "Holy cow!" And I called my cousin, and I asked her. I said, "Rose, where do the girls go to school at?" And luckily, they went to a different school.
Mhm.
I said, "Are you watching the news?" She said, "No." I said, "Well, there's a shooting going on at Columbine High School." And oh my gosh, she freaked out. She turned on the TV. She's now watching the same feed, and she says, "Oh my God, there's Bill's truck."
Mm.
And Bill, who's my cousin-in-law,
Mhm.
he was the fire chief. They were at a firehouse down the street from Columbine the day that happened, and uh, they heard the shots. He went ahead and sent one of his ambulances to go ahead and stage down there. They didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
So we're watching the news, and the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department and the Littleton Police Department, they're staging up. And I never forget my cousin Rosemarie asked me, she said, "Well, my family name is Buster." And she said, "Well, Buster, why aren't they doing anything?" I said, "Because they don't know what to do."
Right.
Mm.
And because Littleton, Colorado and Jefferson County, Colorado are neighborhoods where the officers ride around and wave to people, and that's pretty much it.
Sure.
And I said, when Denver SWAT gets there, I said, I guarantee you they'll make a move.
Mm.
That's exactly what happened when Denver SWAT got there. And I went up there because Bill was having a tough time dealing with everything. And I went up there a couple of weeks later and hung out with him for about a week. And I met some of the guys. And I met one of the Jefferson County deputies. And my cousin told me what all I had done. And he just asked me, he said, "What did we do wrong?" I said, "Y'all waited."
Mm.
I
Mhm.
said, "Y'all waited." I said, "The first time you got there, you heard gunshots." I said, "Y'all should have gone." Well, we only had 4 or 5 officers. I said, "So what?"
Yeah.
And when Denver got there, Denver SWAT said, "What the hell you guys doing here? We got to go. People are dying in there." And had Littleton and Jefferson County made a move when they got there, half of those kids wouldn't have got killed.
Sure. Well, and I think that's something that I've seen in my career covering all kinds
Yeah.
of jurisdictions is like I remember years and years ago, probably 15, 20 years ago now, in Wesson, Mississippi, there was a bank robber and he had hit banks across the South. And he walks into a bank in Wesson where one police officer who was a part time officer and I think his full time job was to be a pastor, and he's on duty.
Yeah.
And he watches the guy walk out of the bank And it's like he's got his gun on him and he's watching him, and the guy looks at him and just like keeps on walking. And he got so much criticism because he didn't shoot him. And his thing was there were people in the bank. I mean, I think he made the right choice. There are people in the bank. He's just a bank robber. Like, this wasn't
Yeah.
violent, all these things. And the whole world was like, why didn't you shoot him? But I've always gone back to the fact that this is Weston, Mississippi, a town of, I think at the time, maybe 1,100.
Yeah.
You know, like you've got folks that yes, they are protecting and serving and they are just as important and they've done the same training, but they haven't had the life experience to know in that
Exactly.
moment,
But
I need to go in this school or I need to do this with this bank robber or
I
whatever
mean,
like that.
it's happened here in Jackson before. One night, one of my sergeants, great guy, funny guy, and people, robbing stores and stuff like that. He drives up to the stop and go on Jefferson Street when it was still there, and he's just going there for a cup of coffee. And he looks and he said, "What the hell is that idiot doing in there with a gun in his hand?" He said, "All these armed robberies are going on. He's standing there with a gun. Next thing he knows, he's in the middle of a shootout."
Right.
Because the guy was robbing the store, and he comes out and opens fire on the sergeant. And
Oh, there's a guy with a gun. What's he
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah.
it just didn't register with him that, oh my God, I walked in on an armed robbery.
And I think what you touched on is kind of what we were talking about earlier. Until you've had that experience, oh, that's what he's doing with that gun.
Yeah.
You
would
might not.
never.
I mean, yeah, there's something to be said for training and whatnot, but to a normal person, is that a gun?
Yeah.
You know?
That'd be me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
You
he
like
was
that?
just, all he was thinking about was getting a cup of coffee.
Mhm.
He just wanted a cup of coffee.
Right.
And he gets in the middle of that mess.
And that's how fast it turns.
That's
Yeah.
how fast it turned.
Charlie, I have a question. So you've lived your stories are incredible and you can go all day and I'm sure you could write 12 books about them, right? If you could go back in time and go back to 9-year-old Charlie and look at him in the eyes, what would you tell 9-year-old Charlie?
Be honest with you, nothing really. I'm happy with what I did and where I went. Now, I'll be honest, had my parents not been disabled, I would have probably moved down to Florida and joined the department down there, or sheriff's department down there, Leon County or Orange County or something like that, or Metro-Dade, just for the action.
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you give yourself to 9-year-old Charlie to get through the rest of this time?
I don't know, just listen, stay calm, don't get excited, and I really can't. I'm not bragging on myself or anything like that. I can't really think of anything I'd want to change or do different.
I feel like sometimes when you've lived a life and
just-
you've seen all that,
Yeah.
it's like there's no regrets. You just
don't
have
have any.
accepted it, you know?
I don't have any regrets. There are a couple of people I probably wish I'd have killed, but I've been in that situation, and it doesn't doesn't bother me. I'm just not a traumatic guy. I'm just I was involved in a shooting once up in Precinct 3. And I'm the one that got on the radio to get all the appropriate units there, Homicide IED. And nobody knew it was me that pulled the trigger. And I never forget when my officers came up to me and said, "Sarge, who was in?" I said, "Well, it was me." He said, "Well, how you stay so calm?" I said, "Well, you just do." And one of my best buddies, he come up to Homicide to check. He knew about the shooting. He said, he saw me going to IAD, and he said, "Was it one of your guys?" I said, yeah, it's one of my guys." He said, "Who was it?" I said, "Me." "Oh, are you okay?" I said, "Well, yeah, man, it's no big deal." And I've just had this uncanny ability to stay calm. I don't know how I do it. When I've been in pursuits, actually one of my first pursuits that I was ever in, they used it as a training tool at the police academy, how to stay calm in a pursuit. You hear officers screaming on the radio and all that, and one of the dispatchers, of all people, is a guy named Mike Skinner. You know the Skinner name.
I
His
do.
dad was William Lewis Skinner.
Yeah.
And Mike had been on dispatch probably like just a few weeks or months. And then I get in this huge pursuit. And he was just, he said, he called me up and said, I don't know, how did you stay so calm? I said, you've got to be calm. You're not doing yourself any good if you're, and it seems like in my world, the worse the stress situation is, the better I react. I thrive on stress. I love stress. I hate peace and tranquility.
Yeah.
And the worse the situation is, the better I like it.
I
Now,
think it was, I mean, whether it's okay to quote him or not, but I think it was Andrew Jackson that said, I was born for the storm and the calm does not suit me.
that's right.
Yeah.
I feel that way. Yeah, I was born for the storm, and the calm does not suit me. My wife, I'll tell you, she keeps telling me, she says, you know, I keep talking about leaving my little part-time job. She said, you go crazy.
Yeah.
You know, you got to have something to do.
I
She
can
said,
see that.
you're just not the one to sit around and watch TV and all that. But I literally thrive on stress. The worse it is, the better I like it.
Okay, so closing thoughts. What advice, and I think we've asked you this before, but it never hurts because there's always people watching these. And we got Howard Blue, your friend of mine,
Yeah.
has commented.
God, man, I
Charlie,
have
long time no see,
Yeah.
good looking fella. So that said, there's a lot of guys that look up to you that comment on here. And of course, now they have proteges.
Yeah.
They have people that they're training. And of course, your son is on there too, Zach.
Yeah, my
So,
favorite son.
yep. So that said, just what advice do you give officers that are out there every day, right now in this environment?
Well, one, take the job serious. Don't take yourself serious. And I see a lot of officers that I interpret it as that, like it's their laws that people are breaking. I watch these videos. Cops up there yelling and cussing people and all that. It ain't my law. It's the state's law. You're not bothering me at all if you break it. You know, you're not hurting my feelings a bit. Now you hurt me. Now that's a different story. You hurt my partner. You know, we're gonna rock and roll. But it's just stay calm and watch your six and watch your partner six, and everything will work out. But be ready and have your head on a swivel. And this is what I would tell every rookie that I was training when we get through on a call. I said, all right, I want you to sit here and think for a minute how many times we could have got killed just then.
Yeah.
I said, think about that. And you know, I would let my rookies make their own mistakes up to a point. And I would let my officers, and I told my officers, and Juan Clory, I'll tell you, when I came to the precinct, I told him, I said, look, as a rule, sergeants don't go on calls. And I told him, I said, look, the main reason I'm a sergeant, one, I like the flexibility. I said, but I'm going to go on these hot calls. And I said, I'm not going there to oversee what you're doing. If I see you're making a mistake where somebody's going to get killed, yeah, I'm going to interrupt. But I'm going to let you run the call. If I see a mistake after the call, then we'll talk about it. I said, but I'm going to be in the middle of the action. I said, I am an action junkie. I'm an adrenaline junkie. I'm going to be in the middle of it. And I would work calls. And bless the guys' hearts in Precinct 3, I'd call out on a wreck. And they would all show up. And I said, no, I've got this. I can write a report. It's no big deal. But they wouldn't let me do anything. And one night I called for backup on a traffic stop. And next thing I know, my whole precinct's there backing me up. And, you know, I got in trouble one time. It wasn't really a pursuit. One of my officers in Precinct 2 had pulled over a guy down behind Jackson State and got the driver's license. The guy took off. Well, we didn't know it at the time, but it was a child kidnapping. And he called me and said, Sarge, I got his driver's license, but he's running from me. I said, well, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I said, residential. I said, let's be cool. I said, just monitor. I got more units down in the area. And I said, y'all just circulate and just watch for this car. And if we get a chance, we'll tag him. Even then, we didn't know it was a parental kidnapping. Or it wasn't actually a parental kidnapping. But anyhow, we get reports of a wreck in front of Buck Sullivan Auto on Terry Road. And one of my officers got on and said, Sarge, I think that's the car. and it was a black Cadillac Denali SUV, and it had rolled over. Suspect had run, and unfortunately, the child was in the car, and it rolled over on the child.
Oh.
And the guys at Buck Sullivan Auto, they ran out there, and between them and several of my officers, we rolled that car back off that baby. It was dead.
Yeah.
And when I saw what had happened, I mean, I got on the radio, and I said, headquarters, I want my units down here. I want them down here now, and I want that son of a bitch caught, and I want him caught now. And every one of my units in precinct 2, I don't care what they would tell complainants, I got to go.
Yeah.
And they all flew down there. And we set up a perimeter, and within 30 minutes, we had the guy caught.
Good.
And I got in trouble from a chief for saying SOB on the radio. And I said, really? I said, is that all you got?
Right. I thought that definitely applied in this situation.
And I'll never forget, one of my officers told me, Ford was there, and he said, man, when we heard you say that on the radio, we knew.
Yeah.
Sergeant Smith wants us there, and he wants us there now.
Yeah.
But they caught him.
Good.
And Cornelius Williams and Richard McGahee and Bubba Thompson, one that drug him out from under a house.
And some great names right there.
Yep. And they weren't real gentle about dragging him out from under the house.
I guess not.
You know?
And rightfully not.
Yep.
All right. Well, Nicole, any closing thoughts?
Good. Thank you for joining us again, Charlie.
Yeah.
Well, it's my pleasure. Kind of caught me off guard yesterday, but
Well, I'm
obviously I have no life because I can just come right up here.
Well,
Well,
I
I
love hanging
appreciate-
out with you. I'm sorry that I'm the only civilian you have to hang out with, but
Well,
hope you enjoy it for the little.
like I said, I have a couple.
Yeah, right. I'm happy to be in your
But-
corner.
in the circle of trust.
Yes.
Yes.
I have a small circle of trust.
Well, we appreciate you coming and telling your stories.
Absolutely.
And we appreciate you being available because sometimes, I mean, you don't understand what a lifesaver you are. And
Well.
and we sure have enjoyed every time we've had you because you aren't afraid to tell those stories and you aren't afraid to be candid. And that's huge.
Well, my wife was a little concerned about this one because, we were talking about it today, and because she knows how some of these, especially the police more,
yeah.
when we're up here talking about murders, I'm in control of that conversation, but this is blindsiding.
Sure.
So, and it does get to me. I mean, I think about these guys all the time. There's not a day goes by I don't think about one of the guys I've lost, one of my buddies, and either to gunfire, wreck, suicide. But yeah, I think about them all the time. And I think about some of the victims. But fortunately, it sounds kind of callous. But I've had so many victims
Mm-hmm.
that I have a narrow field of the ones that really
Yeah.
I
But-
think about.
And I'll say, just from a reporter standpoint, you feel almost guilty that you don't remember all the names. But
Exactly.
But that said, if you remembered all the names, you'd drive yourself crazy.
Well,
So that's God protecting you by weeding some of that out.
but that conversation came up. We were coming back from Seattle, and my cousin rode back with us,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking about a case that I had worked, and it was a big case. And I said, I can't remember the guy's name. And my wife says, why can't you remember his name? I said, it was just a number.
Yeah.
And then, of course, my cousin looks at me, and he said, Buster, he said, you led an amazing life. And I said, I never flew an F-18 before.
One day, maybe.
So
Still time.
I've been proud of him. Like I said, when he was the real
Real deal.
he was the real maverick.
Yeah.
And
Well, apparently, just absolutely brazenness runs in your family. So,
I of course I had my other cousin was an ag pilot, and of course he was killed 2 years ago, going on 3 now, in a midair
wow.
crash. And my family, we've had some pretty interesting lifestyles. One's a fighter pilot, was a fighter pilot, and of course he went with Delta. And I told somebody asked me, so how big of a plane does he fly? So it's like flying a football field,
Right?
Because
Just a football field.
he flew an Airbus A380 all over the world.
Wow.
And he was a captain with Delta. I think he told me that his 62,000 employees, he was number 480 in seniority.
Jeez.
Wow.
So, but once you turn 65, you got to go.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
I always
Well,
wanted a family member that was a pilot.
that'd make life a lot easier, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard you get good plane tickets.
yeah, he does. I don't. I don't.
I feel like he
But-
could have thrown you a couple.
Yeah,
Over.
yeah, he's a good guy. He's an interesting guy. That's a guy you should talk to someday.
Yeah.
He
We'll
just
get him on one day.
yeah, he's a sharp guy. If
would
you
be
got a
cool.
man, he went to go see Top Gun. Obviously,
Yeah.
It's him going to see Top Gun is like me going to watch a cop movie.
Right.
And he said, Charlie, Buster, he said, he said you could tell all the former fighter pilots in the crowd because every time something stupid, they're going, oh, he said, there's about 12 of us in the crowd. He said,
Yeah.
we picked each other out. And, but yeah, he's a great guy.
That's
great guy.
Well, yeah, one day we'll get you to get him
I
on
hope he can
for us.
adjust to retirement because I
Excellent.
know he's going to be. We were at Mount Rushmore, and he looked up, saw jet up about 32,000 feet, and he said, "I used to work up there." And I pointed to the gutter, and I said, "I used to work there."
Nice. Well, on that note, we want to thank you guys for watching and listening to Investigation Homicide. Guys, remember today, Peace Officers Memorial Day. This week is Law Enforcement Appreciation Week. When you see these men and women that wear the blue, remember that there are stories that you don't know. And there are things about their lives that you can't even fathom. And so if you're letting somebody in the media, whoever they are, tell you a story that makes you think that there aren't good men and women out here doing this job, they're lying. And I say that as a member of the media. Thank you guys for watching and listening. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. If you need a podcast, Daniel Anderson and Audio Alchemy, that's who to go to. We appreciate y'all. Have a good night.
Night.